Everyone in the jungle laughed at the elephant. He was big, yes. Strong, yes. But he wasn't fierce. He wasn't loud. He wasn't proud like the lion or clever like the fox. Instead, he helped everyone, a stuck monkey, a thirsty bird, a wounded wolf. While others roared and ruled, he simply gave his time, his effort, his back, his heart. They called him soft, weak, too kind to survive in this wild jungle, they would say. But no one knew that one day, only kindness would survive. In the heart of the dense jungle, where the sun barely touched the forest floor, lived an elephant named Veer. He was massive, his footsteps shook the ground. But inside, he carried a soul so gentle that even butterflies felt safe landing on his trunk. Every morning, before the others woke, Veer would walk to the river and fill a fallen tree trunk with water for the tiny creatures who couldn't reach the stream. When vines tangled a baby deer, he freed it. When birds fell from nests, he waited below until their wings grew strong again. The jungle noticed, but not kindly. "Why waste your time on the weak?" growled the tiger. "Helping others won't feed you," hissed the snake. "He'll be the first to fall when trouble comes," smirked the jackal. Veer never answered back. He just smiled and continued helping. His kindness wasn't for attention. It wasn't strategy. It was just who he was. And then came the fire. It started as a dry whisper in the leaves. By the time the wind joined, it was a roaring monster. Trees crackled. Nests fell. Beasts ran. Chaos ruled. But Veer didn't run. He turned toward the flames. With each mighty step, he carried water in his trunk from the river to the burning edges. Again, and again, and again. While others fled for their lives, the too kind elephant became the only wall between the fire and everything else. Animals watched from far cliffs. The same ones would mock him. As Veer returned, his skin scorched, his legs shaking, but his trunk still lifting water. Until the fire finally died. The jungle was changed. Blackened trees. Scattered homes. Silence everywhere. But not all was lost. Thanks to Veer, the youngest were safe. The smallest were sheltered. And the river path still flowed. That day, the animals saw what they hadn't before. Kindness is not weakness. It is courage in its most selfless form. And Veer, he didn't ask for thanks. He didn't wait for praise. He simply walked back to the shade of his favorite tree and rested. In the jungle, power was usually measured by how loud one roared, how fast one ran, or how sharp one's claws were. Those who could intimidate others with strength or cleverness held the spotlight. But there was one creature whose presence was large, but whose heart was larger, the elephant named Veer. While others competed to dominate, Veer quietly walked through the forest like a gentle breeze in the midst of storms. He never tried to lead. He never tried to impress. He simply cared. When the birds built nests too high and the winds knocked them down, Veer would stretch his mighty trunk to help place them back. When the jungle floor cracked under dry heat, Veer would dig gently with his tusks to let hidden water trickle up for the smaller animals who couldn't reach the river. The animals often thanked him in whispers, embarrassed to be seen needing help. After all, in a jungle where survival was brutal and ego was worn like armor, kindness was mistaken for softness, and softness was mistaken for weakness. But Veer didn't seem to mind. He greeted every creature, from the tiniest ant to the proudest tiger, with the same calm humility. He didn't offer long speeches or advise others on what they should do. He just did what was right when no one was watching. The predators laughed behind his back. "There goes the jungle's gentle fool," scoffed a leopard, "always wasting time helping the helpless instead of hunting like us." Even the herbivores sometimes dismissed him. "He acts like a saint," said a jealous deer, "but one day when trouble comes, he'll fall like the rest of us." What they didn't realize was that kindness builds something no muscle or tooth ever can: trust. Without roaring, Veer had earned the respect of the silent, the vulnerable, the ignored. While others ruled through fear, Veer walked freely through every corner of the jungle, welcomed with nods, tiny salutes, and warm eyes. Then one summer afternoon, the sky turned strange. Winds shifted direction. Birds flew low. The trees rustled without reason. Something was wrong. It started as a spark, a forgotten lightning strike far away. But within hours, fire spread across the edges of the jungle. Flames leapt from one dry leaf to another. Panic gripped the animals. The mighty tiger ran. The clever fox vanished. The strong deer bolted with his herd. Chaos became louder than any roar ever had. But Veer didn't run. He turned toward the danger. With his massive feet, he stomped paths for smaller animals to escape through. With his trunk, he carried water from the river again and again to douse the flames where he could. The fire didn't care about kindness. It burned skin and cracked bark without mercy. But Veer kept moving. His ears scorched, legs trembling, but his eyes focused. While others saved themselves, Veer saved everyone else. A mother bird cried for her chicks trapped in a hollow tree surrounded by smoke. No one dared go back. Veer did. He lifted the tree with all his might until the chicks fluttered out. A porcupine lay unconscious near the fire line. Veer curled his trunk, scooped him gently, and carried him to safety. Even the arrogant panther, who once mocked him, was trapped by fallen branches. When their eyes met through the smoke, shame flickered in the panther's gaze. Veer didn't hesitate. He lifted the branches and nudged the panther forward, shielding him from the heat. By nightfall, the fire had died down. The jungle was scarred. Trees were blackened, homes destroyed. But because of one elephant, the one everyone underestimated, life still pulsed. The tiniest creatures had made it. The nests were still warm. The injured were still breathing. And Veer? He was tired, burnt, but not broken. The animals gathered the next day in silence. The same ones who once whispered behind his back now watched him with new eyes. No one said it, but everyone knew it. Strength was not in how loudly one roared, but in how quietly one served. Veer's kindness, once mistaken for weakness, had become the jungle's greatest strength in its darkest hour. Not through force, not through fear, through compassion. That's when the jungle learned a lesson they never forgot. Kindness never fades. It lingers, it heals, it returns, especially when the world least expects it. Long before the fire ever reached the jungle, there were signs of the kind of strength Veer the elephant carried. But they weren't loud, and they didn't flash like a leopard's leap or thunder like a lion's roar. Veer's strength lived in the quiet spaces, in the stillness between conflict and compassion, in the pause before judgment, and in the moments when he chose to lift others, even when no one thought it mattered. The jungle was filled with animals that climbed, crawled, and conquered. The strong were celebrated, the clever were admired, and the fierce were feared. Titles were unspoken but clearly felt. Who was the fastest, the loudest, the most cunning? And in between them all moved Veer, towering, silent, and rarely included in the competitions of the jungle. He didn't care to compete. Instead, he paid attention to the ones who went unnoticed, to the animals others dismissed. There was a squirrel who struggled every dry season to gather enough food. While others ignored her, Veer would leave cracked open fruits at the base of her tree. He never stayed to be thanked. There was a crippled deer who could no longer run with his herd. Veer would gently walk with him to the water, shielding him from the sun with his great ears. Even the hyena cubs, abandoned by their pack, found shelter under Veer's wide shadow one stormy night. Other animals watched this quietly, confused. "Why help those who can't help you back?" whispered the fox. "He could crush us all, but instead he protects the weakest." "What a waste of strength," muttered the wild boar. But Veer wasn't wasting anything. He was investing, not in favors or in praise, but in the idea that everyone deserved to be lifted, no matter how small or broken they appeared. His power was not in domination, but in elevation. What no one understood then was this: the world remembers those who make others feel seen, safe, and significant. One morning, when thick clouds hung low and the air felt strange, the lion called for a gathering. Trouble was coming. The dry wind spoke of danger. The monkeys had seen smoke in the distance. The birds refused to fly east. Still, arguments broke out. The cheetah insisted on leading evacuations. The buffalo argued they should stay and fight. But no one could agree. And as fear grew, so did chaos. That's when Veer stepped forward, not with a roar, not with command, but with calm. He didn't shout. He didn't point hooves. He asked, simply, who needed help first. When the smaller animals panicked about getting left behind, he offered to carry them. When the older ones said they couldn't outrun the danger, he mapped safe paths through the jungle using his memory of the land. The ones who had laughed at him before now looked to him with uncertain eyes, not because he demanded it, but because in the moment where everything was shaking, his calm steadiness felt like the only ground left. The crisis grew, and so did Veer's strength, but not the kind anyone expected. He didn't fight fire with fire. He didn't prove himself by saving the powerful. He chose to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. His back became a bridge, his trunk a lifeline, his presence a shield. And when the fire finally came, the real power of kindness was revealed. The lion once feared froze. The cheetah vanished into smoke. The tiger climbed to safety alone. But the animals Veer had helped, the squirrel, the deer, the birds, even the silent snakes, all gathered around him. Some clung to him. Some followed him. Some simply waited, knowing he would not leave them behind. He didn't. One by one, in small groups, he led them through safe trails. Sometimes he carried 3 creatures at once. Sometimes he doubled back when he heard the cry of a young cub. The jungle burned, but Veer moved like the river, wide, calm, unstoppable. The ones who had once thought he was wasting his strength now watched it save an entire generation. Because the truth was clear now. Real power doesn't lift itself up. It lifts others. Veer never asked for reward, never claimed credit. When the fire ended and the jungle quieted, he stood among the survivors, not above them, but beside them. And something had changed. The jungle no longer spoke of him as soft or simple. They spoke of him with awe, like one speaks of a river that gives life or a sky that shelters all. Because when the fierce faded and the loud fell silent, only the kind remained standing, and in their hands, the future felt safe. When the jungle healed and new leaves began to sprout from the blackened branches, the animals gathered not for a feast, not for a show of power, but to honor something they had never truly seen before, the quiet strength of kindness. Veer, the elephant who had once been ignored, now stood at the center of a changed world. Not because he demanded it, not because he wanted recognition, but because he had become the symbol of something deeper than strength, heart. In a world where it was easier to walk past suffering, he had stopped. In a place where pride often silenced compassion, he had spoken with his actions. In a time when everyone thought only the strongest would survive, it was the kindest who saved them all. The lion, who had once led through fear, now lowered his head and said softly, "I used to think a roar was enough, but now I see it is silence filled with service that truly echoes through time." The fox, once so proud of his cunning, stepped forward and admitted, "I planned, I tricked, I calculated, but I never made anyone feel safe. You did that without a single scheme." Even the snake, who never trusted anyone, curled gently near Veer's leg and whispered, "I thought kindness was a trap, but it was the only truth I never saw." And yet, Veer said nothing. He simply smiled, his eyes calm, his breath deep. He wasn't proud in that moment. He was peaceful, because those who live with kindness in their hearts don't act for applause. They act because they understand the quiet power of doing good, even when no one is watching. That day, young animals sat at Veer's feet, listening, learning, remembering. One tiny rabbit asked, "Why did you help us, even when others laugh at you?" Veer looked at her gently and said, "Because one day you'll grow up and you'll face a moment where you'll have to choose between being right and being kind. I hope you choose kindness. It will feel smaller at first, but it will build a life you're proud of." A bird with a bandaged wing chirped. "But they never thanked you. Wasn't it hard?" Veer nodded slowly. Kindness is not a trade. If we only get something back, we've already lost the purpose. True kindness asks for nothing and gives everything. That's what makes it rare. And that's what makes it powerful. A young lion cub, barely the size of Veer's foot, said, "When I grow up, I want to be strong like you." Veer leaned down, gently touching the cub's head with his trunk. Then be the one who stops when others run, listen when others speak, and stand for someone smaller than you when it's not easy. That's the strongest thing you'll ever do. The jungle was not the same anymore. The fire had destroyed trees and nests, but it also burned away ego, pride, and judgment. In its ashes, something new had grown. Respect for the quiet ones, the soft-hearted, the steady souls who never sought the spotlight but carried the world on their shoulders anyway. The animals began to act differently after that. The cheetah slowed down to walk beside the turtle. The bear shared his berries without being asked. The monkeys who once stole food from others now passed it to the young first. Not out of fear, not out of duty, but because Veer had shown them that kindness wasn't something you saved for when it was easy. It was something you gave even when it was hardest. And every time an animal chose compassion over pride or help over hesitation, it was as if the forest itself grew greener, stronger, more alive. Years passed. Veer grew older, his back heavier, his steps slower. But his presence never faded. Wherever he went, hope followed. Even when his body tired, his legacy grew, not carved in stone, not sung in songs, but written in the everyday acts of 1,000 small hearts, forever changed by one kind elephant. And so, the jungle learned what many never do. That real strength is not in what you take. It's in what you give. That greatness is not loud. It's humble. That power is not how many follow you, but how many you lift along the way. And that the world doesn't remember you for how big you were, but for how big you made others feel. So be like Veer. Be the one who stays when others leave. Be the one who gives when others grab. Be the one who listens, helps, uplifts, not for reward, but because it's right. In the end, storms will come, fires will burn, and chaos will test us. But the ones who live with kindness, who love without reason, and give without expectation, they are the ones who become the quiet heroes whose light never fades. And in their light, others learn to shine.